Move aside, move aside. She ran through the hallway like a bullet train colliding with every other person. She held her bag with her one hand while her other hand was busy holding coffee cup. Her fellow employees glanced at her once before getting back to their work. They had an unbothered expression on their face as if it was nothing new. Well, it wasn't a new thing to watch their boss, clumsy secretary, being clumsy. Why does this always happens to me? She fake cried as she had to climb the stairs because the elevator was already occupied. She panted and took a few sips of the cold coffee she was holding. She strolled towards her boss' cabin. Stopping in front of his cabin, she took a few deep breaths. Gliding her fingers through her hair and dusting her clothes, she fixed her messed up steed and knocked on the door. Hearing a faint come in from the other side, she opened the door and stepped inside. "Good morning, Mr. Park," she greeted politely and walked towards his working table. "Here is your coffee." Her words were left unsaid when she stumbled on her steps and the coffee cup slipped from her hand. She shrieked with fear and squeezed her eyes shut to feel the pain, but luckily she got a hold on something and balanced herself before she could kiss the ground. "Thanks goodness," she murmured to herself and opened her eyes to find herself holding a chair. She sighed and stood upright. Her gaze traveled from the chair to her boss, and her eyes went round at his side. The coffee cup was resting on his head upside down, and the coffee was dripping down his head to his face and further down, staining his neatly ironed white shirt. One gulped when he blankly stared at her. "Mr. Park, I am so sorry, let me." She shuddered and rounded the decks, walking towards him. As she stepped further, he winced as his face twisted in pain. What happened?" "My foot," he hissed through his gritted teeth. Vine looked down at her. Eyes went wide when she realized she had stepped over his foot and was literally crushed it with her pointed heels. She instantly pulled her foot and stepped back. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry." She bowed again and again, hitting her long wavy hair on his face. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Park, please forgive me." She bowed once again. He flinched when her hair hit on his face more powerfully this time. It's okay, Miss Vine." He grumbled and rose from his chair. He handed the now empty cup to Vine. "I'm going to take a shower. Please take out my clothes." His voice was soft, unlike when he talks to others. She bobbed her head and went to his closet that he had to arrange in his office after he appointed her. Stepping inside the closet, Jimin's eyes caught Wine, who was rummaging through his huge collection of ties to find the perfect one for the suit she had selected for him. He was wearing a bathrobe and drying his wet locks with a towel. He threw the wet towel away and slowly walked towards her. Reaching near her back, he contemplated for some time before sliding his hands on her waist, hugging her from behind. He felt her flinching beneath his touch, but soon relaxed. "What are you doing, Mr. Park?" she asked as she leaned against his chest. He put his chin on her shoulder. "Nothing, just feeling how it feels to hold your wife in your arms." He placed a lingering peck on her cheek. She smiled and turned around facing him. She garlanded her arms around his neck and bobbed her nose with his. "I am not your wife. Yet. You are not my wife yet, but will be soon." He palmed her lower back, pulling her more closer. "Really, Mr. Park?" "Yes, soon to be Mrs. Park." He smiled and leaned towards her luscious lips, which were tempting him. "Mr. Park," she mumbled. He hummed in response and closed his eyes. "Mr. Park," she called him once again, but he just hummed, leaning towards her face. He was enjoying her closeness. The way she fit in his arms, it made him feel like she was made for him. She was the one for him. "Mr. Park!" A sudden yell startled him. He snapped his eyes open and his eyes instinctively moved to his arms, which were holding the wet towel. Wyan wasn't there anymore. He looked around and found Wyan standing while holding two ties in her hands, looking at him weirdly. Are you okay? You have been zoning out quite a while now. Yeah. He cleared his throat and rubbed the towel on his hair, covering his face with it to escape from embarrassment. Which one? She asked, showing the two ties. Anything you like? Okay, brown one. Uh, you should change. She fled away from there with the speed of light. What? Why did she not run away? He murmured to himself, then he realized he was standing just in bathrobe. I'm going crazy. He smiled to himself as he recalled what he was imagining earlier. Miss Vine, could you help me with this? He showed her the brown tie. She smiled politely and nodded. She took the tie and stood before him. She was engrossed in making his tie, whilst his whole attention was on her. The small pout on her lips, eyebrows furrowed as she focused on the given task. Her biting or nibbling her lower lip in between made him suck a good amount of air. His hands tightly fisted inside his trousers pocket, controlling the deep urge of holding her waist. No wonder he was head over heels for this woman who was his secretary. Otherwise, why would Mr. Perfectionist, who can't even bear a small mistake of his employees, would arrange a whole damn closet in his office and change his clothes every now and then without saying a word to her? Done. She fixed his collar and lifted her gaze to his face. Her breath hissed when she found him staring at her intensely. Warmness spread on her cheeks and her face flushed. She stepped back. I should get back to work, she mumbled, avoiding his eyes. As she turned around to leave, he held her arm, spinning her around. An eerie gasp escaped her lips when she collided with his chest. She gulped audibly and slowly peered at his dark brown eyes. Why were you late? Her face paled and she smiled awkwardly. Actually, I was working till late. I woke up late. Of course, she wasn't going to tell him the truth that she had watched K drama all night and slept at the wee hours of day, then woke up late. Seeing her batting her eyelashes innocently, he melted then and there. He gulped down the urge of pinching her cheeks and nodded. You shouldn't work till late. Sleep is important to keep yourself healthy. He mused and left her arm. She nodded and fled away from there. She is making me insane without even trying, he murmured, placing his hand on his chest where his heart was beating at a wild rate. He ran his hand through his hair and motioned towards his desk to start working. Jimin was going through some files when his phone rang. Lifting his keys from the file to his phone, he let out a sigh when his mother's name displayed on the screen. He groaned, already aware of her calling him. He didn't want to take the call, but aware of his mother's antics, he chose to do otherwise. He didn't want her to create a scene in his office and ruin his image before her employees. Yes, Amma. Jimin, I arranged a date for you. Amma, no, not again. I don't want to go on any date. I'm done with this and I have a lot of pending work to complete. Jimin, she sternly called out with a hidden warning. Don't make me come there and pull your ears. He whined and thrust his head back on his chair. I don't want to go, Amma. Do you want to die single? Learn something from your father. When he was your age, he had two kids. Who two kids? You and your brother, you brat. You better go on the date. But no, I don't want to hear any excuse. Go on the date or find a girl for yourself. I don't want to die without seeing my grandkids. She mumbled in her tone, feigning sadness. Fine, this is the last time. I won't go on any other dates. He hung up without waiting for any response. He threw his head back and let out an exasperated sigh. He was tired of going on blind dates arranged by his mother, and the one he likes wasn't getting any of his hints. We are here. She smiled and looked at Jimin, who was staring at her, lost in his thoughts. Mr. Park, we have reached. She tucked his hand behind her ears and looked away from his intense eyes. He harped a response but made no movements. Mr. Park, I think you should go inside. Your date must be waiting for you. She faked a smile which hid her sadness. He sighed and glanced around before stopping his gaze at her. You want me to go? Oh, your mother wants you to go. That's why she specially told me to drop you off here. I should go then, he said, more like asked. With a slight smile, she nodded. He internally scoffed. She wanted him to go, but her smile and her raspberry fragrance was tightly holding him back from moving anywhere away from her. I think I should really go, he muttered whilst Wine blinked her eyes, nodding confusingly because he reiterated the same thing but didn't make a move to go out. He glared at her before getting off the car and stomped inside the restaurant without looking back. Wine was perplexed at his sudden change in mood. Is he on his periods? She murmured lowly and started the car engine to go home, but something caught her eyes. He forgot his wallet. She grabbed his wallet, which he forgot or probably left there intentionally. I should go and give it to him, but what if I don't? She trailed off. The latter idea seemed perfect during his date, and she almost made her mind to not give him his wallet. But it will be bad for his reputation, and above all, he's my boss. I shouldn't be having feelings for him. Letting out a sigh, she clutched his wallet and got off the car. Vine looked around the crowded, lavish restaurant, her eyes searching for the sight of her handsome boss until she found him sulking at the far corner. She was about to walk towards him, but someone's voice stopped her. I know, baby, it's not like I love him or anything, but it is not bad to get some money out of him. He's a billionaire, and if this date goes well, we will have a new source of money. Vine looked in the direction of voice and found a girl wearing extremely short dress talking on her phone. Vine's face twisted in disgust. How can someone think like that? Poor him who is going to date her. She murmured. The girl walked past her. Vine's eyes widened when she walked towards Jimin's table. Don't tell me Mr. Park is a poor him. She whispered in shock, but she quickly composed herself. I need to save him. She resolved to herself and stormed towards them. Jimin, she yelled, standing in front of them. Jimin and that girl stood up. One had a look of confusion whilst other face was beaming with happiness. I sent you to bring ice cream for me. What are you doing here and that too with this witch? Excuse me, are you calling me witch? Exactly. Jimin, let's go from here. He nodded in a heartbeat and stepped towards her. No, he won't go anywhere. We are on a date. Date? There's no date. He's my boyfriend. He'll go on a date with me. Jimin, who was standing behind Ryan, smiled sheepishly when she mentioned him as a boyfriend. Why should I believe you? You can be lying. I mean, why would his mother set him up on a date if he is already in a relationship? The girl, being stubborn, unnecessary, argued Ryan. Do I look like I care? You believe it or not? He's my boyfriend, and also I'm pregnant with a child. Ryan smiled and rubbed her slightly bloated belly. Ryan looked behind and smiled at Jimin, who stood frozen on his spot. Isn't it, baby? Ryan batted her eyelashes and Jimin unconsciously nodded, grinning like an idiot. His whole attention was on the new nickname she called him just now. He felt a tingling sensation in the pit of his stomach. He shyly bit his lower lip, controlling himself from hopping around in happiness. Got your answer? Now leave before I make you. The girl stomped away from there, fuming in anger. Ryan giggled, which she thought she could trap Mr. Park in her fake love cage. She chuckled and turned around. Her smile disappeared and her eyes went round when she came face to face with the smirking German. She gulped when she realized what she just did. What was? Here's your wallet. She handed him his wallet and disappeared from there with the speed of light. Van was sticking to the adjacent wall of Jimin's cabin. She wanted to go to her cabin, and for that she had to walk past his cabin, and Jimin being Jimin left the door open. She didn't want to face him after what she did last night. God, please help me. She closed her eyes and fake cried. Something happened, Miss Vine. Fluttering her eyes open, she found him standing beside her. Her cheeks turned red in embarrassment, which made him smirk. I think we have a lot to talk, especially about her child. He whispered the last sentence in her ear, and her eyes widened hearing him. Mr. Park, I was drunk. No, you were not. He asserted down and dragged her inside his cabin by holding her wrist. What was that, Wine? Am I your boyfriend? Are you really pregnant? He teasingly wiggled his eyebrows. No, that girl. Wine was cut off when someone barged inside the cabin. Wine and Jimin looked at the intruder. A look of horror took over their face when they saw Jimin's mother coming towards their direction. Her face was stoic hard, and it was scaring them. She stood before Wine and stared at her blankly. Wine looked down, avoiding her gaze. You are pregnant with Jimin's child? Ma'am, it's not like. Wine stopped in the middle when she pulled her in a gentle hug. I'm so happy. I'm going to be grandmother. Finally, my bratty son did something appreciable. She pulled back and kissed her forehead lovingly. Bring your parents home, Wine. I want you both to get married soon. But, oh, I'm so happy. She twirled around in happiness and skated towards Jimin, who spread his arms, thinking she was going to hug him. Instead, she smacked him. Take care of her. Sometimes I think I'm not your son. You adopted me. He grumbled, rubbing his head. I and your dad did a lot of hard work to bring you to life. Dare you to say that again? She smacked his head again and left from there, not forgetting to kiss Vian's head. What should I do now? She bit her nails in anxiousness. I think you are in trouble. Yeah, I wanted to save you from that witch, but I didn't know I was calling trouble for myself. Well, I have a solution. She snapped her head towards him and looked at him with hopeful eyes. What? He smirked, stuffed his hands inside his pants pockets, and bent down to her face level. How about we made this happen in real? How about we get pregnant for real this time?